There's a change now to the way that CPD is going to be carried out for osteopaths in the UK. And we've been asked to do a quick little video just about our opinions of it. So first things first, can you summarise the changes for us? What's new and what's different?
Okay, so we'll start with what's the same. There's still 30 hours of CPD to be done every year. The difference is now they're going to be bringing that to more of an accumulative thing where they put in 3 sets of 30 hours, so 90 hours over 3 years. The biggest change at the end of that 3 years, there will be some sort of review process where your work is reviewed. This can be done by your peers or possibly by the GIOS or by somebody else that can give an objective opinion as to how you are functioning as an osteopath. The thing about now is we also have to meet certain criteria, so there are different outlaid things here such as CPD and consent, and objective activities, so this again could be a false patient scenario or an audit of the clinic. There's also going to be safety and quality in practice and professionalism and skills and performance. So we essentially have to go through a tick box scenario where you're doing something CPD wise under those 5 categories.
Sure. It's basically organising what CPD we're currently doing under the banners of osteopathic practice, I suppose.
Yes.
And it makes it a lot easier then to identify anywhere where a practitioner might be falling short,
yeah,
or exceeding.
Yeah. Under the current scheme, you can be very, very personal with what you want to put in a CPD. Yeah.
I suppose what a lot of people will be concerned about is that when structures change, they'll be worried, will that mean that they're more likely to fail? I know we've talked about it and we don't think that's the case, but maybe you'll explain why.
So at the moment it doesn't seem to be a pass-fail scenario. It's, have you met the criteria for the 5 things we've discussed already? If you haven't, after the 90 hours, the thing will be is you'll be given some sort of flexibility to start and meet that standard, or to go off and do some further CPD to meet the standard. The best thing about the peer review going to be is that hopefully the people there with you that day will give you some sort of idea as to what you're doing well, what you haven't met yet, or yet met, and then they can give you an idea, because they're also doing the same thing, ideas towards what you need to do to meet those criteria. So it's not essentially a fail bracket. It would be the scenario of after the 3 years, you've been maybe more than 90 hours CPD, you've been told that you need to pick up these ideas and you need to pick up, start and cover these aspects, and you haven't, and therefore you're sort of giving people no option but to heal you, and
I think it's
from there.
Probably worth mentioning as well that as it currently stands, the vast majority of people are making the grades. They are doing what they need to fulfill the revalidation requirements every year, and that's not likely to change. I think what it does offer is a bit more support within regional communities, because there's more interaction between osteopaths, and that for somebody who maybe is struggling to make up the requirements that are needed, there's probably an extra layer of support that they could use. Yeah. So I think it's a good thing in that regard as well. So I suppose one of the new additions to the requirements of CPD is the CPD in consent and communication. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So some of the simple ways that we have already spoken to the GIOS about this would be setting up certain courses that we can attend. The courses will be set up for consent, essentially, specifically. Once you go and do the course, you've met the criteria for knowing what is acceptable for consent and things. The consent ideas now have changed in the osteopathic profession. We no longer need written consent. We just have to essentially obtain continued consent throughout the process of osteopathic care, letting the patient know what you're going to do and why you're going to do it and what they expect from us.
Sure. I think, as we've talked about before, as 2 male practitioners alone in the room with a patient, it can be quite vulnerable in a professional sense. And by undertaking these CPDs in consent, it means that we're up to date with current practices, and we can then practice best practice and protect ourselves as best we can. But also, from a human perspective, as maybe a first-time patient to osteopathy, they might not know what's going to happen. And just knowing the best way to put them at ease, inform them and empower them to make decisions as to what treatment they're comfortable with is surely only going to help raise our reputation. And I know that as two fairly new additions to the osteopathic profession, the standards that we've been taught throughout college are going to be pretty current. I think this is one of the areas that within the wider community of osteopaths, times have changed quite considerably. And I think that there, hand on heart, there'll be a lot of practitioners out there who feel that they aren't comfortable with the idea of consent and when to get it, what to say, what risks to mention, and this is pretty ideal for them just to make sure that they're up to current codes and standards. And then the other new addition is the objective feedback. For you, what does this really mean, and what sort of shape does it take?
Well, the objective feedback is going to be an aspect within your practice where somebody can come along and tell you how you're actually doing. Is your practice up to the standards necessary? Is your professionalism and scope of practice being met, and is it up to date as well? And one of the simple things you can do is somebody can come along as a false patient, another practitioner. They come in and do as you do. You greet them, go through the entire osteopathic process, and at the end of it, they do a little bit of a review, sort of tell you what you do well, what you don't do well, what you could change, what you don't change. This doesn't have to be one person, this could be a couple of people, maybe over the 3 years. And if you're comfortable doing that there, the aspects of doing it with a couple of different people would probably be that it's not, you're not doing it with a friend, and you're not doing it with someone who will say, oh, you're doing really great with these things when you're really not. It's about constructive feedback as well. It's not about somebody coming in and picking on every little bit of your profession and your professional standards and every little bit about your clinic. It's to come in and say, yeah, this looks great, this doesn't look so great, maybe you can pick that up. Or this is how I do things, and I think I hold myself to a high standard in this aspect, and I think you need to pick it up there. Or you've done really, really good there with that, and I don't really do that within my clinic. I might start to pick that up as well. So it's just as good in that objective sense for the person coming to be the false patient as it is for the person who's taking the patient on.
Sure. And I suppose some people will be worried that this will take quite a long time, because it's every time there's something new comes along, people are worried that it's going to take them away from doing what they do, which is treating patients, making them feel better. Do you think this is going to take a long time?
I think the concerns of taking a long period of time was more so with people who have families, and more so with more experienced practitioners who are very, very busy clinics. But what I find being relatively inexperienced time-wise outside of university, that these things don't take that long to do. If you're doing an objective activity such as a false patient, you're talking about the length of one treatment or one process, of going through the treatment process and bringing them through, and possibly 15 minutes, half an hour to an hour afterwards. We're talking a couple of treatment periods. Anybody that says they can't meet that there, I think, is being a little bit unflexible themselves.
Absolutely.
The thing about it too, it doesn't have to be your time. If you're going to go off and pay another company to do an audit on your clinic, it doesn't have to be you involved in that. You simply go through the process of getting that done. Yes, it costs an extra bit of money, but this is how you set standards, and this is how we keep the standards good and met.
Absolutely. And it's, from the way you're speaking, you sound quite enthusiastic about these changes. Is that a fair assessment?
I think the enthusiastic part comes from the fact that the GIOS are getting more involved with us now. We in Northern Ireland have, again, the group of people coming together. The GIOS has came over numerous times and are really trying to get involved with what we would like and what we feel we're comfortable with. We in Northern Ireland again have created a scenario that most of us are comfortable with, some other ones are not, but the GIOS are very flexible with other groups in regional areas, deciding on what they want to do. There's no set structure for what you have to do, it's what you agree to do. And if it comes down to it, any individual practitioner maybe doesn't have to go for a review process with a set of people or their peers. It might be a different process. They themselves will have to work out how that's done, and it will have to be acceptable under GIOS standards.
Sure. No, I think I'd agree with that, and I think this offers a bit more flexibility, and at the end of the day it ensures that we as a profession are meeting the standards that we set for ourselves. I know it can be quite easy sometimes to take your eye off the ball when you're chasing down targets of seeing so many patients a day or a week, and standards can slip. And also as regulations change, so as you were saying, we're quite fresh out of university and out of college. times have changed from when we've qualified than from what some of our colleagues who've been out in practice 20 years. I think it's important that whilst you and I might say that osteopaths lead the way in terms of practice and patient care and communication, we have to make sure that the profession as a whole is representing that as well. I think this is the new changes will certainly help to sort of propagate that and then sort of
I think in certain places, maybe Northern Ireland especially, with the fact that everybody's so spread out along the country, it's a thing of getting people together, and it's picking up ideas. It's seeing what other people are doing well and then spotting what other people aren't doing well. If they come across that they're doing something that you don't totally agree with, it gives you that chance to give constructive feedback and to receive constructive feedback, so that you can be confident and happy that you're running your practice in an acceptable way, and then that you can put, instead of having to sit and worry about consent and worry about, am I doing this correct, am I meeting the standards, you can put that to the side, knowing that you are, or knowing that what you have to work on, and you can practice on building up a clinic and building up relations with other professions and different things like that.
I suppose ultimately it all comes back to providing the best service we can for our patients, and certainly by having somebody else look at your CPD portfolio at the end of the 3 years, you might say, listen, you're lacking a little bit here in techniques and variety of techniques. Maybe in the next cycle, that's something you'll address and look at. And that way you are best able to serve your patients, I suppose, and they get the best care. And then they feel that they can go and promote osteopathy through word of mouth. And we all benefit as a profession.
The aspect of it's of it being completely objective, it's always a difficult thing to be completely objective with anything, because one of the strengths of osteopathy is also its weakness, that we're all individuals and we all think in different ways. The strength of that is it keeps it very varied, and it keeps people going out, getting new ideas and bringing them back and trying to create a perfect model of treatment. I suppose the weaknesses is we can never agree on a set perfect treatment or a perfect way to treat people and do things. We simply have to come under the scope of practice, follow a code of conduct that's set up by the GEOSC, and with the constructive criticism and feedback that you can get from a peer review, it really does allow you to help people build themselves as professionals and build their practices. If someone says, oh, I don't think you've done well there, well, it gives you a chance to also say, well, I think that's actually fine. I'm within the scope of practice, I'm within the code of conduct, and so therefore I don't need to be told that I need to vary my techniques. My techniques work for me. And I think that's a perfectly good thing for setting a standard for osteopathy, because I don't change it much, and therefore people know what they're getting and what they expect when they come to see me. Different things are better, are quite good.
Perfect. Thanks very much, sir.